Some FCT indigenes are actively clamoring for voting rights in state elections. They are calling on INEC to involve them in the governorship and state houses of assembly elections. In a press statement, the indigenes say when Nigerians go to the polls tomorrow to elect their leaders, the Abuja original inhabitants and all residents of the FCT will sit back and watch the rest of the country exercise their inalienable political rights. They say their land was forcibly taken under Section 1 of Military Decree No. 6 of 1976, which named the area as a new capital of Nigeria. They say over the last 40 years, consecutive governments have failed to keep their pledges to compensate the original inhabitants.
And the Rise News politics editor Sumner Sambo joins us now for more on this story. Sumner, great to have you on the news tonight. We do appreciate your time. We had to drag you in. We need to say that.
Thank you so much
on your rest day. The issue of Abuja, I mean, you know this way better than anyone. Whether you look at this section of the constitutions that refer to Abuja, be it section 299, I suppose, yes, and section 134, which determines who becomes the president of Nigeria, you find the importance of the FCT. But would you say that the FCT is being treated as an important place other than a political capital of Nigeria?
Thank you, Adeswa. Let me start with saying that the Nigerian government seems to be disobeying the courts of the land, starting from the Federal High Court that had ruled on this issue, to the Court of Appeal, and then to the Supreme Court. Now, in all of this, the Federal Capital Territory, it's a very, very important aspect of our federation. It's a special state, and it's accorded the special state status by the founding fathers of the nation. If you look at the spirit and the letters of the Constitution, Section 299 specifically says that FCT, that's the Federal Capital Territory, shall be treated as if it is one of the states of the Federation. And you go on to Section 300, 301, 302, it outlines clearly that because of the special state status, the president is going to be the governor of FCT. And not many Nigerians know that on February 25th, when they went out to elect the new president, they actually voted for a president and the governor of the Federal Capital Territory at the same time as it stands.
Deputy governor.
Yes, the deputy governor and all of that. So if you look at Section 301, it clearly explains what Section 299 means, that the Federal Capital Territory has the trappings of a state. And as a result of that, because of the special status, all the things that are accorded to a state ought to have been given to the Federal Capital Territory.
But that's not been done.
And that's why it said that the Executive Council of the Federation, which is the Federal Cabinet, the Federal Executive Council, shall be deemed to be the body of commissioners. So the ministers are like commissioners in the state. The vice president is like the deputy governor of the FCT. The president is the governor, while the National Assembly is, when they are talking about issues of FCT, it sits as the State House of Assembly of FCT. And then, of course, the judiciary, we already have the chief judge of the FCT and all of that. Now, this is very important because in 2001, there was someone called Okoyede who challenged the Federal Capital Development Authority, FCDA, as to if FCDA, which is in charge of developing the FCT, is to be deemed as the Ministry of Works in a state or not, or if it is a federal executive body. But of course, when that case got into the court, way up to the Court of Appeal, the Court of Appeal ruled that the Federal Capital Development Agency is like the Ministry of Works in a state, that the federal government cannot be performing municipal duties like local governments, and that's why there's distribution. So apart from that case in Okoyede versus FCDA, there was also another case that was charged to court in 2015 on the status of the Federal Capital Territory and the indigenes and whether they deserve to be given a state or not. The Federal High Court ruled that indeed FCT is a state. And then in 2020, there was also another case that got up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court, coincidentally, is Justice Roosevelt, who was then the Justice of the Supreme Court, that ruled indeed that the FCT has the trappings of a state. So if it has the trappings of the state, and you could have read of Section 134, where that controversy emerged recently, where they were saying the FCT is the 37th state, it emanated from that constitution, that judgment by the Supreme Court, which is the Constitutional Court, that if indeed it is the 37th state, then there's no reason why on election day tomorrow, people in the FCT, both the indigenes and the residents, shouldn't be voting this time around for people who represent them directly.
Well, I think there is plenty of controversies here, because if you look at Section 299, 300, 301, you know, in the Nigeria's amended constitution, all those rights, you know, have been taken care of, just like you cited. Why would they need a governor again when the president is exercising that power? I mean, it's very straightforward. If I just may quickly read,
go ahead,
you've expatiated, but for the benefit of our viewers, that's Section 301. It says, without prejudice, you know, to the generality of the provisions of Section 299 of this Constitution, in its application to the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, this Constitution shall be construed as if references to the governor, deputy governor, and the executive council of a state, howsoever called, references to the president, to the vice president, and the executive council. Why the agitation? Because here, the country probably needs further judicial interpretation, and that should be at the Supreme Court.
Yes, the Supreme Court has now made itself very clear. Now, the contradiction here is that what we are operating, Christian, it's a military contraption where you have an unelected minister exercising the powers of a governor. If the Constitution says that the governor of FCT is President Muhammadu Buhari, why didn't President Muhammadu Buhari delegate the powers of a governor to the minister? Why did he have to delegate the powers of a minister to exercise the powers of a governor? So those are the things that we're saying, that it's undemocratic. There needs to be the democratization of governance in the FCT. The National Assembly is overburdened with several issues that the nation is facing. So the National Assembly should...
is the legislative arm of the FCT.
Yes, so it should shift that to an elected assembly. An elected assembly by indigenes and by residents who come together to say, look, this is what we want and this is what we ought to get. Now, you pay taxes as a resident of Nigeria's Federal Capital Territory to the government, but an unelected minister, someone who doesn't care about you,
so
exercises the discretion as to the taxes that you pay.
So this is
why should it be that way?
Unlike the rest of the country that will go tomorrow to elect who governs them as governors and those in the state houses of assembly, the FCT people get an appointed official who is a minister. That's what you're saying. Now, the contradiction, there's a huge contradiction here. That's why we say that the people who wrote the 1999 Constitution with references to Section 299 were very hasty. Now, don't forget that our elites were trying to carve a fiefdom for themselves, where it's very safe for them in the country, especially then the military class that were about exiting the military rule that we are having in place. So they needed a nest of power where when they are troubled in their various states, they will rush down to Abuja and stay. So they wanted a place where the residents and the natives cannot easily exercise their rights. Because they had tried this in Lagos before, but the Lagosians fought against it. People like Mobolaji Johnson and all of that. And that's why you could see that Lagos eventually had two status. Being federal capital and being a state at the same time. So we are asking, in this circumstance that we're having now, how come the Federal Capital Territory cannot exercise those dual mandate like it happened in the old federal capital of Lagos? Because if not, it's all a bundle of contradiction.
If I bring back to the memories of Nigerians, late Justice Akinola Aguda,
yes,
who was the chairman of the creation of the Federal Capital Territory as Nigeria's capital. He had said that one of his appearance before a committee of the National Assembly, that the indigenes were adequately compensated, for the lands acquisition and what have you. And we still see the agitation for compensation by indigenes when government builds some, houses for them, they move further into, unused lands and the rest. Why that?
Now, Akinola Aguda may have been misquoted in that. I will tell you clearly, because the documents that are available in the archives of the federal government speak contrary to that. Because the committee itself that was set up with Akinola Aguda chairing it had recommended that the people who are going to give their lands must not be made stateless by the Nigerian nation.
Yeah. And
why is it that way? Because in this particular land, there are none of the majority tribes. The Hausa, the Fulanis, the Igbos, the Yorubas, and all of that. So these are minority people. They must be protected. And then secondly, they outlined that there was going to be 8,000 square kilometers, which is times 4 of Lagos. Lagos is 2,000 square kilometers. And saying that at that time they had said that the 8,000 square kilometer was even too large to be Nigeria's federal capital territory. Because if you go to Washington, D.C. and Australia, Abuja is actually modeled after Canberra in Australia. And if you look at it, the governmental institutions that are there, it's not supposed to be more than 500 to 1,000 square kilometers. And within the original plan, it was around 1,500 to 2,000 square kilometers. But having had 8,000 square kilometers, the thinking was by Aguda panel that it should be reduced to about 4,500 square kilometers. But later on, they had said that no, there may be a time where Abuja will grow over and it will need to expand. Like so let them have a buffer zone while within the city center you have between 250 square kilometers where you have it. If you go to Washington, D.C., which is the capital of the U.S. with a population about 330 to 340 million, where the seat of government in Washington, D.C. lies, it's not up to about 500, between 500 to 1,000 square kilometers. And so why do we at 200 kilometers, 200 million people need about 8,000 square kilometers? So that debate was there. But eventually, the federal government reversed its decision when the University of Ibadan was given a baseline study to conduct as to how many numbers of indigenes are in the FCT then. And when the budget came out and the numbers came out, they said that the federal government will require 2.8 billion naira then to relocate the natives. But then the federal government's budget was between 300 to 400 million. Where would we have got about 2.8 billion naira to carry and relocate these people? Okay. So because of that...
It's an ongoing debate.
Yes, just very quickly. Okay. Just very quickly. So because of that, the federal government under then General Olusegun Obasanjo had to say that they were changing the policy. Instead of total relocation, they were now going to do an integration policy. Babangida came, he continued with that. Abacha came, he continued with that. Obasanjo came back again, and he continued with that. And so what is happening right now is contrary to what the founding fathers and even the committee that prescribed recommended, that the people who were to be here should not be made stateless. And so for them not to be going to the polls when other Nigerians are going to elect their leaders, something needs to be happening.
It's a deprivation.
And the federal government has refused to obey the Federal High Court judgment, the Court of Appeal judgment, the Supreme Court judgment, which also said that FCT should have a minister.
Okay. Yes.
It's a controversial issue. And
absolutely. Thank
President Muhammadu Buhari
says... Thank you so very much.
He's not disobeying court orders, but we can see that there are several court orders that the federal
we
government
know how passionate Sumner Sambo is with this issue, Don't worry, we'll continue the narrative on different fora, Sumner Sambo, Director News and Politics Editor, Arise.